was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I need you to survive.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. And I'm back with my colleague, Matthew Ehret, from the Canadian Patriot podcast. He's an author, a journalist, and an all-around great guy. How is it going today, Matthew?
Hey, Rashid, I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Well, you know how I'm doing. From the conversations before the show.
Well, so far, so good, man. I can hear you. I think the audience can hopefully hear both of us. So I think your technical issues have been resolved. I hope. Fingers crossed, toes crossed. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, Matthew, you wanted to share a few things with us before we address a lot of things that are going on in the news. So the floor is yours, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, man. Well, absolutely. I thank you. And we were chatting a little bit on X back and forth a little bit regarding my desire to try to bring something that many people in the geopolitical commentary sphere and analysis sphere are a little bit uncomfortable walking into this terrain, which deals with psyops of an UFO nature, of an ET nature. And I think it's really important because, how we perceive the world, the perceptions we have about the nature of the cosmos create a sort of contextual foundation of the mind in which we then shape why we think things are happening, of a war, of a military intelligence nature, why are policies occurring the way they are rather than some other pathway that is imaginable. And so there is a battle for our imagination, and that's been going on for many generations. That's, the CIA wasn't stupid when they realized that they could be gaining a lot of power by putting billions of dollars into funding Hollywood movies, into funding TV shows and platforms that would feature nominally entertainment material on Netflix, on Amazon Prime. But they're not stupid. They don't want to entertain us, right? These agencies don't care about entertaining us to make us happy. It is a war, a battle over what we think the nature of our creation is, the nature of morality, which informs our decisions, how we determine what choices we make based on what moral values, is entirely colored by whether or not we have a concept of God, the creator, the laws of the universe, being made in the image of said laws and said creator, or not, or maybe made in the image of gray aliens or demon aliens or whatever. That'll definitely affect how we think of ourselves and how we think of, why things are happening on the big picture. So I've been making with my wife, Cynthia, and our friend, Jason Dahl, a series of documentaries over the past 3 years on the hidden hand behind UFOs. We're basically going into the final stages of a big book, going through the fact that it's not what we're being told by Steven Spielberg. This week it's going to be Disclosure Day. That's been celebrated in the media for months and months and months as the big thing. And Spielberg just recently gave an interview that Breitbart covered. No, but it wasn't too Breitbart. It was another platform. But he gave an interview where he said that the truth of UFO disclosure will shake the foundations of the entire Christian world and have people question their very idea of God. Now, Spielberg's been at this for a long time. That was one of his early movies that made him a big player, was Close Encounters of the Third Kind way back in 1978, advised by a bunch of government spooks and social engineers who were on set advising him, and we could talk a little bit about that. But my documentaries go through a lot of the different dynamics, including the hoax of Roswell. So I wanted to just chat a little bit about why they're doing this, how we can know that this is a hoax. But before we do any of that, I wanted to play a little video by a comedy group in 2008, which you might have seen, called The Whitest Kids You Know. Have you heard of these kids?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna play a little 2-minute segment of a skit that they did in 2007, actually, in season 2 of this skit comedy series, and I hope that the sound comes through. It's called "Are We Going to War with Iran Today?" And here it is. Can you see that?
Yes. Let me add it to. Wait. Let me add to screen. It should be able to.
Okay.
Add to screen.
And just let me know if the sound is not coming through.
Okay, thank you for waiting. The president has asked me to come out and make a brief statement about the wire that just went out a couple minutes ago. To make things short, I will just confirm that yes, we do have a moon base, and yes, we are currently experiencing some bear problems. Now, I will open it up if there are any questions.
Mr. Press Secretary! Mr. Press Secretary! Mr. Press Secretary!
New York Times.
Yes. I have a 11-part question.
I'm sorry, I only have time for 2.
All right, let me get this straight. So, the United States government we do have a moon base, and that there's a problem on this.
Yes, that is correct.
Follow-up question? Are you with us?
That's a really good question.
No, we are not, and I would like to remind everyone to keep the language civilized. This is the White House.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, Bob Daniels, Newsweek.
Mr. Daniels.
How long have we had the moon base? And are these bears Earth bears, or are they from the moon?
I'm sorry, I'm not at liberty to disclose how long we have had this moon base at this time. We do believe these to be Earth bears. We have no reason to believe these to be lunar bears or even Saturn bears.
Todd Albright, PBS. There's Saturn bears?
I am also not at liberty to go into the various types of woodland life forms on Saturn or any of the other 12 planets.
9 planets.
Right. I've said too much already. What I can show you is the images that have been beamed down to us from the Odyssey satellite system just a couple hours ago. This is the view out of the front door of the United States secret moon base. This was taken yesterday before we discovered the bear problem. And this one was taken just a couple hours ago. So, as you can see, bears everywhere.
Mr. Press Secretary! Mr. Press Secretary!
Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, those bears appear to have guns and motorcycles.
We believe they may be involved in some sort of intergalactic drug cartel, perhaps affiliated with one of the interstellar wizard alliances.
Wizard alliances?
Yes, next question.
Just a thought, more of a shot in the dark, but we wouldn't happen to be invading Iran today, would we?
You got me. You got
I fell for it. You almost got away with that one.
me. No, I went too far. I almost had it. I should have stopped after the slides. I knew I should have stopped
didn't think
there.
anything about it until the cartel thing, and I was like, what?
Okay, all right, let's forget this whole thing. Who wants a drink? First round's on me. Come on! Yeah!
All right. I just thought that would create a nice little mood.
Before we go further, thank you for the $10 super chat, Chili Pepper dash 09Y. Go ahead, Matthew. Go ahead, Matthew.
No, they really hit it out of the park, and I thought that was just so great, considering especially the timing of it all. Right, this was happening at a time back in 2007 when Dick Cheney had come very, very close to getting his long dreamed of war. I think it was November of 2007 that the propaganda machine was in full blast to finally do what we did to Iraq and extend it now to Iran, and of course. The wind was taken out of the sails back in those times when the National Intelligence Estimate had circulated. I don't know, some courageous figures within the NIE circulated a report demonstrating publicly that we were lying, that Cheney was lying, that there was no WND program that existed after 2003 at least, and with those revelations, the the propaganda machine couldn't really campaign. So all that to say, I'm not saying necessarily that this is the full replication of what Dick Cheney was trying to do in today's world, but the idea of invaders from the beyond, let's just say, whether from another planet, or from another galaxy, or from another dimension, as certain, I think what's becoming more and more popular, that's been as a narrative that's been infused into the story of UFOs, where they come from, what they are, is increasingly people like Anna Paulina Luna, who's in charge of the committee on UFO, or not UFOs, government secrets or something like that. They're increasingly using the language of interdimensional aliens, not to keep it located within the the ET extraterrestrial thing, or so that's now more acceptable, and we're seeing, like, within Tucker Carlson's guests, with J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, are all giving their presentations. Trump's kids are going public very loudly, Donald Trump Jr., about their idea of ET disclosure as the greatest thing, and how these are actually demons. So J.D. Vance talked about his demonology and how he firmly believes that these are actually demons from another dimension. So it's weird, right, that you have congressional inquiries, whole congressional investigations committees. You have official people within the executive branch of the government coming out so openly with intelligence spooks from the CIA. The CIA just recently announced that it hasn't been just one recent UFO crash that they've been reverse engineering in the United States, but that 9 UFOs crashed since 2001, ignoring all of the hundreds of other UFO crashes that happened since Roswell in June of 1947. This is the CIA officially coming out on mainstream media. So clearly, they either really all of a sudden woke up and started loving the truth, and, or supposed to look at this stuff because other things that we're not supposed to look at are we're not supposed to look at. So what are those things, right? And what are the motives? So we did this documentary series. It accompanies a book series called The Revenge of the Mystery Cults, going through the occult underpinnings of a lot of the intelligence workings behind MI6, behind the creation of the CIA in the earlier black chamber that became America's NSA back in World War I. That is where the NSA, which is part of the Five Eyes, comes from, the black chamber, the signals encryption office that was set up by the second in command of MI5, Claude Dancy, who was the founding deputy director of MI. It wasn't even called MI5 back then, but that's what it became known as. He founded that, and then he came to the United States in 1909, bankrolled by William Rockefeller, who just bought the Sleepy Hollow Country Club in New York, to commission Dancy to create a private intelligence bureau funded by the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, which he did. And out of that, he groomed several disciples, one of which was a guy named what's his name? Churchill. Montague Churchill. He was a cousin of Churchill. His name was Montague Churchill. There's another name. It'll come to me. But his first name is escaping me all of a sudden. But it was a cousin of Winston Churchill, who he groomed to be the founder of what was known as the Black Chamber in 1918 as a military intelligence signals encryption office, which changed its name to Black Chamber in 1932. So there's this whole thing that is tied to Aleister Crowley, because Aleister Crowley was also being brought in by the Sleepy Hollow Country Club in 1914, where he remained in America organizing propaganda to enmesh the United States into World War I. He's the cause for the amazing research by Richard Spence.
Your mic.
About my mic set?
Yeah, your mic. It's muffled a little bit. It just started muffling a little bit on your end.
Okay. Is it a bit better now, or?
Yeah, it sounds a little bit better now.
I just changed it to a different now. Is it a bit different now, or?
It's just a little mumbling. Like in the middle of your speaking and talking about it, it just started muffling a little bit.
Yeah, I can only hope that it can resolve itself, because I don't know what else to do beyond what I already did. So, maybe if I put my mouth further away from the microphone, maybe that would be better. How about now? Is it better?
Yeah, that's better. I can hear you. I can hear you clearly now.
How about now? Is it
Yes.
still good?
Yes.
Okay. I hope that the audience wasn't completely missing out on what I was saying. If they were,
No,
I'm
it just
sorry.
did it for a second. It just did it
Yeah?
for a second.
Okay.
So pretty much we heard mostly everything, and then it muffled for about
Okay.
a 10-second thing.
Okay. So all that to say, when you start looking at the it's more interesting and yet a lot darker, and you can't explain such matters, or why did Hitler emerge onto the scene? Why did fascism emerge in the first place? It's not enough just to say, oh, it got funded by Wall Street and London banks, and because of that money, which is true of American and British and Swiss industrialists, fascism was able to grow and thrive and become this force. It's not enough to say that, because there is an ideological underpinning that made all of that happen. There's a certain ritual on the stage of history that allowed for that to happen, that involved a dialectic left-right game, which has been used since ancient times to keep the slaves fighting each other, to keep us in a state where we're in disequilibrium, where you have a rights factions and organizations that are set up to satisfy something known as the right, that is a bit more, tied to rigid authoritarian logic, and then the left, which is tied to fluid, emotionally driven denials of right and wrong and truthfulness per se, where, we saw this manifest in great chaos in the form of the Jacobin versus the Girondin right and the Jacobin left during the French Revolution, which originated the modern idea of the left and the right, where the Jacobins were the movement of the people, right? The oppressed, uneducated but pure, noble savages that were abused by the elites and wanted to be organized by the Robespierres out there, who could rabble rouse and to weaponize basically the masses into a thoughtless mass of emotion, of rage and anger, that would then be used, as all color revolutions have been used ever since, to overthrow and destroy any viable architecture of the nation itself, while the reaction was located in the right, in the Girondin conservative responses that wanted to impose rigid structure onto the anarchy of the chaos. And they, did their thing, and they took turns cutting each other's heads off for like 5 years of civil war before the chaos created a fertile soil for a Napoleon, basically a proto-fascist Napoleon, to resolve the contradictions and impose a metastatic, like an order from above, where he very quickly declared himself world emperor and tried to reconstitute the old Roman Empire with all of the trappings, including the idea of recognizing a Zion for the Jews in the Middle East. He even wrote a letter, a proclamation to the Jews to say, we'll reconstitute this as the center of a new order. He created the Sanhedrin of France and promised the building up of Solomon's Temple as the new center of a mystical initiation for the 1,000-year Reich that he was planning. I shouldn't have said Reich, but whatever the French word for that was the promised age, the golden age that this emperor was going to bring about. Now, it didn't work out that way. Things ended up going in a different direction. But the model of the left-right game, that's what gave rise to the Führer idea, where if you look in the 1920s, there was a battle between the Bolshevik left of radicals that hated the injustice, they hated the abuses of the aristocracy, but then they were weaponized to be a chaos force, a chaos agent across many European countries, where they're, like Kamala Harris said, right? During the election campaign, she said Germany before Hitler was the greatest beacon of liberty because they had drag shows, in Berlin, and she was talking about the greatness of just the fluidity of gender and how everybody was accepting everything. And it's true. The people of Germany were driven nuts because of World War I, because of the chaos of the Weimar hyperinflation, the controlled destruction of the economy of the German people. They were driven crazy. And so many of them came to believe that maybe the cause of the war, the cause of my pain, is the belief that there is right and wrong, the belief in male and female, and the belief in morality, that if we just let all of that go and just loved each other orgiastically, of course, a lot of drugs, then we'd have peace on earth. And a lot of people believed that stuff, and it became a cosmopolitan crazy hub of degeneracy, out of which you could see it became the way that the conservatives, who didn't want to let go of their Christian ethic and their values, were so disgusted and were so unaware of the higher operating force. They were just so disgusted that they were more easily radicalized to double down on a perverse version of conservatism of the right in response to this thing, where this became the hub, the recruitment of the paramilitary units of the SS, the new Nazi movement that took power. And after a long period of battles inside of Germany between the left and the right, you had a resolution stimulated by an inside job known as the Reichstag fire. And out of that chaos, right, there was an excuse for a new Napoleon to come in and say, I'll restore order. And he basically gave a voice to the oppressed and abused people who had suffered so much of war and injustice. And it became the foundation of Nazism, again, made possible through the money of a lot of Swiss, a lot of American industrial and Wall Street banks like Prescott Bush, a lot of British banks and powers, but also the ideology itself of fascism had a core occult agency that even Hitler talked about regarding the secret doctrine of the ascended masters, who were able to channel to adepts, special people, like through the Thule Society, which is sort of the inner black magic core of the Nazis, of the SS. People like Dietrich Eckart, that Hitler in his Mein Kampf called his mentor. That Dietrich Eckart is recorded to have described the importance, how he taught Hitler how to receive messages from the powers of the beyond, of the secret doctrine that he talks about, which is a reference directly to the British occult operation of Madame Blavatsky, of the Theosophists of the 19th century, that gave rise to a Western popularization of the swastika as far as an emblem, a symbol that could be used to justify the creation of new institutions, which were directly behind its popularization in Germany, with German versions of the Theosophists that were selling themselves, and all of them seemed to revolve very much around Aleister Crowley, these other black sorcerers who were obsessed with bringing in 1,000-year age of Antichrist, an age of Aquarius, an age of Lucifer, which they're all obsessed with this idea, and they have rituals that they're coming up with. And I think it's all hogwash, personally, but they believe it. They're obsessed with it, and they have power. Like I said, Crowley played a direct role in getting the U.S. sucked into World War I, while he was directly working with Claude Dancy, who had just set up British intelligence and had set up this American intelligence agency funded by the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Morgans, who would later fund fascism after World War I. They were doing this with Crowley, setting up these complexes and sending and transmitting information about how to the Germans that Crowley was always in direct communications with, telling them that the Lusitania had weapons on it. That information came from Crowley directly to the Germans, to the top German, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Germany, that justified the idea that this passenger ship was justifiable to be shot at, because it was, in fact, and it's true, it was carrying munitions, thus breaking the neutrality agreements. And that killing of American people, civilians on that ship, was used as propaganda, like 9/11 was, to try to get popular sentiment to change from being isolationist to supporting getting the U.S. into the war, which it finally was successful at doing. So all that to say, there are, when you appreciate these things, you start seeing that, okay, this whole UFO thing it actually is coming from a darker place. It's not just simply to distract us from certain things we should be looking at, which it is doing, that's for sure. But there's another element to it. And so the documentary series that we did begins with Crowley, and the fact that Crowley was the first one to design in 1918 in America the gray alien archetype that everyone has seen in movies and comic books, that gray alien with the big head. That was actually a demon that Crowley drew from one of his Alhambra workings in Long Island, right next to a certain tower that was used, according to American Office of Naval Intelligence in 1918. They tracked down this Crowley operation and this particular tower as being the cause of conduiting information to the Germans via the Swiss, which allowed for a lot of espionage and a lot of sabotage. So this is what Crowley famously popularized as the creature known that he drew and designed, called Lam, L-A-M. And he had a whole story of some sex magic that he did, probably, might involve some human sacrifice, as he wrote about it a lot, probably did a lot. And that became the model that was then used after World War II was done, another war that he was also involved with, and that Claude Dancy, with his Z organization, which sabotaged the resistance in the Netherlands and France. The Claude Dancy Z operation, run by British intelligence as a subfaction of MI6, was basically the same organization he created in World War I. He was still doing it in World War II and amplified it, and books have been written on called All the King's Men, proving that Dancy's operation, which was tied to Crowley, which is tied to these Wiccans, these witch covens that were assigned to carry out spiritual war against Himmler, and Himmler was doing this weird witchcraft. He really was doing this in Wewelsburg Castle. He really actually had a Templar. He called it the New Templar Knighthood, which he recognized correctly as being a knighthood of Baphomet worshipping wizards who were bringing in Tibetan lamas. It gets crazy, but this is actual stuff that the Russians discovered when they got to Germany, and they're cleaning up shop, and they're like, why are there all of these Tibetan lamas? There was like 1,000 Tibetan lamas that Himmler had brought in to Wewelsburg Castle, which was supposed to be the center of the new 1,000-year order of Horus. Like, why are all these lamas here? And there is something weird in Tibetan esoteric Buddhism that Himmler recognized when he was sending in his teams into the deep caves, into the deep Tibetan plateaus, to not just look for the origins of the Aryan species, which was part of it, but they were also assigned to look for what are the rites, what are the magical workings, what are the sex magic rites that the Tibetans had been, for whatever reason, that carrying out in this esoteric version of called Bonpo demonology, channeling, where there was this tradition of basically doing dark magic that they could then use and integrate into the Thule society that Hitler's mentor Dietrich Eckart worked for, or led even. He was a co-founder of this thing. So this is the type of weirdness that permeates the actual history of what made a lot of the big things happen. And all of those forces who did not succeed because patriots, smarter people than most of the political class we today have in the West, at least, smarter people were able to subvert and prevent those types of New World Orders from succeeding. They had to change gears, do something different. And as soon as World War II is done, that's when you have the unveiling of a new strategy that didn't just involve unreconstructed Nazis that went to Argentina, although that was a big one, or that went to South Africa, or that went to, the United States through the Project Paperclip, although that was a factor. But more than Operation Gladio, more than the paramilitary operations of NATO's secret police that created this infrastructure for a parallel government to grow, you had a lot of the big fascist organizations in America and beyond that all had theosophical origins that became the origins of this new movement of UFO cults. So, like the William Dudley Pele silver shirts, which were the American Führer, the American Nazi, created the same day that Hitler declared himself Führer, was the same day the Silver Shirt Legion was created by William Dudley Pedley, who was formerly the head priest of a theosophical order before that, having received channeled messages from Jesus and dead people to create a new dispensation. That's the same day he creates this American fascist regime. And he's being sponsored by American leading blue blood families. And as soon as that no longer works and he goes to jail for being on the wrong side of World War II and has to shut down his operation, he gets out of the war early. He gets out of jail early and immediately becomes the founder of a UFO religion. So does George Adamski, who starts, who was a former theosophical priest, a friend of Pele, who creates the Adamski cult. That all talk about how as of 1947, the moment stories begin circulating in the media that unidentified flying objects have crashed, right? These aliens, their technology is so advanced that they can travel beyond the speed of light, but yet they can't fly. They keep crashing into desert canyons and what have you. You're like, come on. But anyway, all of a sudden, a few stories start circulating. The population's imagination starts getting stirred up by stories of sightings, not of experimental aircraft or of drones that have been maybe taken or absorbed into America's secret science aviation's program from the Nazis, which they also had flying saucer programs, like actual alternative aeronautic technologies that were actually flying very man-made saucers. And you can see even video footage from Avro Air from the 1950s where they're test flying some of these actual flying saucers. But no, don't assume that. Assume that these are alien things from the beyond. And by the way, as all of these former Nazis who become UFO cult leaders all seem to testify, that the characteristic of these beings that welcome their chosen gifted favorites on the earth to communicate their new dispensation to all seem to be blue-eyed Aryans from Venus, right? Light-skinned, blonde, perfect beings who are so advanced from Venus, of all places, too, right? You're like, why are these Venusian Aryan beings like? What is Venus? Well, Venus is, going back to ancient times, that is morning star. Like, that is the morning star. It is the star you see that rises in the morning. You see this. It's the planet that you could see at dusk as it sets. It's the morning star of light and of darkness. It's the archetype of the Lucifer concept of the force that is beyond good and evil, that unites good and evil in a weird sacred profanity, and that became the model of Madame Blavatsky. That's why she even called her magazine Lucifer Magazine. That's why her follower Alice Bailey called her publishing house Lucifer Publishing and the Lucifer Trust, which still publishes material for the United Nations to this very day. That same Alice Bailey, right? They're obsessed with this idea. So that's also, so I can say a lot more about that. But this is like at the heart. If you look at the growth of this stuff, it seemed fringe. It seemed like something for, comic book fans, sci-fi fans. But what is often fringe in one generation is set up to be in the next generation the mainstream. That's how this stuff works. And so we could see this incubation period where a lot of this weird stuff, this fetishy stuff, grew to become the foundations for major intelligence organization connected religions like the Scientologists. That became sort of one of the bigger UFO cults that grew out of pulp fiction writers with a big creative imagination and a lot of occult initiation. L. Ron Hubbard's connection to Aleister Crowley is no secret, right? We know that he was a member of the California Ordo Templi Orientis, OTO Lodge. Movies have been made about this with Jack Parsons, who got incorporated into NASA, right? His jet propulsion labs became a big part of the development of solid rocket fuels. And they were carrying out weird Babylon workings to try to like give birth to the Antichrist in the deserts of New Mexico and California. So you have like this thing that has political intelligence protection support that has created an influence or has gained an influence over the imaginations through investments selectively done in certain scripts, like The Day the World Stood Still, a major 1950 movie that became foundational in sort of setting the stage for how we think about the nature of autonomous machines, self-thinking, judging machines that came to the earth to tell us that we're not responsible enough to manage our own governments for ourselves because, look, we've created nuclear bombs. And so this intergalactic species with a messiah-like emissary who comes to earth in that movie, supported by this machine AI structure that manages all laws of the Intergalactic Federation, has come to tell mankind that it is time that we give up our sovereignty to a supranational, supergalactic authority to protect us from ourselves. And there's a whole like didactic, nasty, patronizing monologue by the machine at the very end telling humanity these things. And so this is like not insignificant when you look at the foundational creation of like what is this disclosure operation. So, and I made a little trailer. I don't know if do you want me to play the trailer for our film series? Okay.
Yes.
And then maybe we'll just I'll pull it back and throw it at you at that point. But that was my long-winded monologue for today. But here's the trailer of our film series, The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs.
Okay, let's see. It should pop up on my end. All right, there we go. Add to screen.
Okay, you see it? All right. In recent years, fascination with UFO government collusion has morphed from a niche interest reserved for fringe conspiracy theorists and ET conference attendees into something approximating a modern religion. While the subject of UFOs has typically occupied a place in the collective imagination and provided fuel for entertainment, it now appears that extremely powerful forces shaping mainstream media and government want as many people as possible to believe in aliens right now. From congressional hearings to dozens of whistleblower testimonies and whole channels such as the Sci-Fi Channel, Gaia Network, and History Channel going full ET disclosure, it appears that it is only a matter of time before officials within the US government announce that ETs have been colluding with government agencies for decades. Amidst all of the stories of crashed flying saucers, reverse-engineered alien technology, and supposed treaties with alien races, one thing remains a constant theme. Aliens are with us. They traveled from either far-off galaxies using advanced technology or jumped from another dimension into ours. And they're bad drivers. Before we can appreciate the origins of this modern myth, it will be useful to review the figure of Lawrence Rockefeller and something that happened in 1992. All right, so that was it. That's the film. That's the announcement of the film series.
Okay. So Matthew, do you think that Peter Thiel and all of these other people who continue to talk about AI and blood sacrifice and Peter Thiel, he has a real fascination with the Antichrist and all of this. Do you believe that all of them are working in conjunction with each other to push this narrative? Because like you said, they're trying to push your attention away. It's almost like the magician's trick. You know, when the magician is doing a trick, they wherever the trick is done, they direct your attention elsewhere. And we see that with the Epstein files, a lot of these guys were caught up in blood sacrifices, children, having sex with children, misusing children. They were hunting black people. Actually, this was left out. They were actually hunting black people on the island. And do you believe that all this is part of their so-called religion or their theology?
Yeah, I do. That's sick, eh? All of part of, I think, when you start looking into the very, very twisted logic underpinning the Gnostic and deeper, older occult, like mystery cults and the mystery religions of the ancient world that so misshaped the worst of humanity during that period in the centuries before Jesus, and what Jesus and his followers were even like up against. You get a better appreciation for like what were the power structures, what was the basis of deciding what is good, what is the right thing to do for the leaders, for the elites, for good, well-behaved humans, talking cattle who have to, be kept complacent and either in a state of fear and terror to be better controlled, or a state of docile hedonism, so that they don't awaken their better qualities, their more dignified qualities of divinity within them. So how do you do that? What would justify such evil to perpetuate, to not just do evil in the time that it exists, but also to perpetuate these very unnatural ways of being for many generations, centuries, millennia even, into what they aspire? I think they hope that these would be perpetual systems forever. But it requires ideology. It requires like some way of thinking about good and evil and right and wrong, right? And how do you think of your purpose and what makes you you, and what makes laws that you didn't create? And so part of the esoteric teaching structure, because all of these organizations, these mystery religions, have, whether of the pseudo-Christian Gnostic variety or the other pagan varieties, they all have an outward, what's called an exoteric order for the uninitiated or the lower initiates that believe one thing, and then an esoteric inner order that's a set of secret beliefs only permissible to be known by those who achieve a certain degree and have passed certain tests to demonstrate their loyalty to the faith, so-called. And what I get is a sense of, both from reading the writings of various types of whistleblowers, looking at their behavior, looking at certain types of documents that have circulated in grimoires over the centuries, things like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn that worked with Blavatsky's, openly professed, she acknowledged that she created an esoteric section for the inner initiates of the Theosophists that were all very close to and had membership of Samuel MacGregor Mathers, all of the leading members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in 1887-88. This is the guy that initiated Crowley into the Hermetic Order. Many members of the British scientific community and intelligence community were all members of this thing, like Samuel William Crookes and others, leading figures, the president of the British Royal Society. So this goes back a long ways. Part of what they believe is that whatever is good can only be good if evil exists, and thus evil creates the good. That thus evil is maybe more important than the good. That to do evil is to cause the good. And so you got this weird, and there's different rituals, there's different ways of sophistically weaving that contorted thread. But the overarching idea in this Manichaean world of this belief in a balance of forces of light and darkness that have to coexist with equal mathematical equilibrium, where everything that is good must be balanced out by a force of evil. It doesn't take them too many more steps to come to the idea that, well, to be truly powerful, thus to be truly good, is to be truly bad. it seems to be something that they do, and then the idea of breaking taboos. Because part of what they think is that right and wrong, conventional morality, conventional traditional faith, which creates boundary conditions on our conscience, that gives us a sense of not, that lies are bad, injustice is bad. These are all artificial constraints that are holding us back from our true divine self. And so part of the practice of becoming your self-actualized Thelemic deity, right? Part of Crowley's dispensation was this channeling session he did in Egypt in 1904, where he channeled a messenger of the god Horus called Ayahuasca, who gave him through his basically it was like a scarlet woman, um, a witch that you basically have sex with and give drugs to as she becomes induced to trance states, altered states, mutterings of random crap that you could then interpret as the I guess the warlock, the priest, whatever. And so he determined that Horus gave him to Ayahuasca this Thelema doctrine of that the true man of the new age would have no laws beyond doing what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Which became the foundation of, Jay-Z's world. I mean, if you look at it, so many of the secular gods that have been sold to us as the cultural icons to aspire to in our current age. David Bowie. People just need to listen to David Bowie's last song, the 9-minute weird song, Black Star, which is an occult ritual, very satanic. He openly talked about being a Crowleyite. Steve Tyler from Aerosmith talked about doing Crowley sex magic to help him gain fame. So many people, so many. The Beatles, who had, an album cover with dead babies that they were holding with slabs of raw meat and blood. Those Beatles had Aleister Crowley selected on their Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band album, and the opening track being an homage to the 20-year anniversary of Crowley's death. It was 1947 that he died. They published this record on the 20th anniversary in celebration of Crowley. There's so many of the figures, Mick Jagger and the Stones, his homage to the sympathy for the devil takes on new meaning when you look at his work with Crowley's disciple Kenneth Anger, making experimental films like Lucifer Rising that Mick Jagger performed in the 1960s with members of the Manson family, who still, carried out murders of Sharon Tate. You're like Bobby Beausoleil, who was a star of that movie, who did sort of who was, by the way, also getting Scientology training. That's what Charles Manson got 180 hours of Scientology auditing when he was in prison and studying Dianetics and studying Robert Heinlein and his Strangers in a Strange Land to learn how to use the arts of self-actualization to develop remote viewing and special godlike powers of magic to help him create followers in a new cult that becomes part of this weird thing. So you're like, there is something going on where even Charles Manson, when you look at why did his followers carry out the killings that they did, they thought that they were doing a gift. They thought they were giving a gift to those being killed by releasing them from the shackles of the evil flesh. Now, they didn't want to do it to themselves, of course. They're perfectly happy to be in the shackles of their own evil flesh, doing orgies and drugs. But they actually got it in their heads that you're doing a gift by bringing people into terror and pain and death. You're liberating their inner light from the whatever. So it's bizarre. It's weird. I mean, Crowley called his lodges the agape lodges. Agape is a sacred Greek word in the Bible that, the Apostle Paul uses to describe something beautiful as the general love of all humankind. It's a great word. It's a wonderful word. And yet Crowley saw no problem calling his own lodges agape. Was he being just a complete liar? I mean, yeah, he wrote the Book of Lies. He basically mastered the lie game pretty well as part of the ritual. But at the same time, I think he actually kind of believed it on some level that he was doing a favor for those who would be the subject of these acts of terror onto children. He even writes documents in his libers, in his book of law, on how do you select the perfect child sacrifice, as far as the ideal intellectual caliber, emotional tone of a young child, of what age bracket is the best. Yeah, he writes this stuff. William Ramsey did a whole book on this and pulled out all of Crowley's different statements in different locations where he's giving advice on how do you do that. And then Crowley said, you know, whenever he was held accountable for it by interviewers, he would say, "Oh, it's just a joke. Nobody would be that terrible." And his followers today say the same thing. He's joking. It's like, well, that's a bit of a cop out. Why did that's not a good joke. And a lot of people tend to die around him at very young ages, like many of his own kids. You know, like, well, it's not a joke then. I don't know. It's quite the coincidence if that's a joke. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers the question.
So what? Yeah, you did. But so, what do you think about this AI revolution? Because a lot of the AI is being pushed by people like Peter Thiel and all of these people who are occultists and who are pushing for a one world government and pushing for the rise of Antichrist or whatever. What are your thoughts on AI?
Okay, so AI is machine learning is something which people already in the 1950s were beginning to realize that you could extrapolate present trends of computing power and computer systems, digital computer systems, and recognize that in time the process of automation would be enhanced. It's cool.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's good. But textbooks were being written, philosophers were observing this. It's an objective fact that the productive powers of society, the industrial powers of production, would be enhanced by the continued improvement upon computing power and its ability to receive feedback information, feedback loops from objective, multifaceted systems of production into a centralized system that would map out and measure the data of whatever you're trying to produce, whatever you're trying to map out, and then make increasing modifications, adjustments to improve the flow of whatever that machine, whatever that productive platform was designed to do. So to a certain degree, I think there's like a natural, I'm not like anti-science, I'm not anti-tech at all. I think that it's a perfectly fine thing that doesn't necessitate interpretations that this is the Antichrist. But I think there were, when you look at a lot of the occultists, especially of the Rosicrucian variety, who took control of the narrative, especially in the late 1960s, of what was not just UFOs, but also what was technology. These are people who were very close to DARPA, people like Jacques Vallée, who's a big player to this very day in the disclosure movement, who put forth with J. Allen Hynek, who was an advisor to Steven Spielberg on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And even Jacques Vallée had the French character in the movie with Richard Dreyfuss, who's a loser, who gets channeled messages from aliens to go to this mountain, and leaves his whole family just to get like anal probed on a spaceship to fulfill his life's mission at the end of the movie. That's the big, like, great ending of the story. But there's a French scientist who is Spielberg even said that he made that personality based on the character of Jacques Vallée, the real person, who co-developed DARPANet, which became the foundation of today's internet. He wrote the book Passenger to Magonia in 1969, where he first outlines, it's basically anecdotal testimonials of people who got abducted, had first, second, third encounters with aliens, and then uses a lot of folk tales and traces out different folk myths and anecdotal stories from Bohemia, from Germany, from England, fairies and gnomes and witches and stuff like that, and says his thesis is that they were all talking about alien abductions and didn't have a language for it. And he's basically saying that these aliens are actually demons doing black magic on their victims. That's his thesis. And that the babies getting disappeared, being kidnapped from villages in Bohemia in the 16th and 15th centuries was actually the same thing. And people getting ritually murdered occasionally. The village people would go out to the forest and find a young boy ritually murdered, tied to a fake cross or something like that, which happened even going back to the Middle Ages. Jacques Vallée was saying, well, that was aliens. They thought it was witches or secret goblins or demons in the forest, but it was actually aliens, which are the demons. Right? That's his thesis. So he started blurring it. And part of his ongoing narrative, he published a lot of books, became a very big influence. He even gave speeches at the UN calling for a one world government architecture to be created to map out alien encounters in 1979 with J. Allen Hynek. Actually, they both gave speeches at the UN. Part of his what seemed different but was always connected in his mind, and we're seeing it now converging, was that the very internet that he was responsible for organizing as a cybernetic system of data management that would have control mechanisms as far as the management of governments, the management of the managerial technologies used to manage governing ministerial systems, which is what it was. It was integrated into NATO. It was integrated into the OECD. It was integrated into almost every branch of government. The idea that, you have to treat every system like a digital machine with very highly compartmentalized parts or departments and subdepartments, and everyone should be highly specialized to be adapted only to do what their localized department is assigned to do, and not really understand what another department does that might be connected to their own work. And only those who are in the nerve center, the central nervous system of the executive branch, would be vetted and thus initiated and permitted to see the whole machine as a one. No one else could see the one. They could only see the parts. And that's kind of how these conspiratorial systems are very effective and always have been that way. It was given that more tightened up language after World War II. And so Vallée is early on describing how this is actually the internet technology itself is like an autonomous entity from another dimension pulling on us towards making us do things like advanced science for the benefit not of humans, but for the benefit of creating kind of like a portal that would be created at a certain point in the future, out of which this autonomous entity could express itself finally, which they, has been given different names in the secular realm of the singularity that Ray Kurzweil and other Google prophets have put forth. It was what Pierre Teilhard de Chardin had a Jesuit intellectual and I think Gnostic priest who hated Christianity, I think. But he rebranded Christianity and he gave it a bit of a Christian veneer, where he was very close friends with Julian Huxley, the eugenicist, where they worked together, the founder of the term transhumanism. That was the Julian Huxley. And they were friends together, co-popularizing the term transhumanism in the 1950s together. And his idea was the omega point, was this future singularity pulling us towards this Christ consciousness, out of which basically an age of Aquarius would occur. He's also a eugenicist. So Teilhard de Chardin, although he's adored by many like mystical Christians because of the nice things he says on the surface for a lot of the uninitiated, they ignore or don't want to look at his private letters that have been made public, describing his own love of eugenics as the most important of all science, to weed out the unfit, the culturally inferior, to create this new man, this new God man that he believes will shape and control the new age. Does he believe everybody should be this or can be this? No, I don't think Crowley believed that everybody should be qualified as being man endowed with thelema to do what thou wilt. That should only be those who are vetted, who go through certain initiation, who deserve the quality of human or man as a name, with all of those, divine properties and rights associated with them. They're not equal opportunity people at all. They think most people otherwise should be killed, or at least rendered into servitude in perpetuity for the benefit of the master class of man, or transhuman, as Peter Thiel has become a devout follower of. So Peter Thiel and all of these people who have been vetted to be assigned positions as the heads of nominally private tech agencies all have a certain common ideology that they had to adopt and internalize deeply in order to be vetted and given the type of influence they were entrusted with to be subservient. And so the idea of the alien, the UFO thing, as that narrative, the tech self-conscious AI demons, the UFO demons, all of that's kind of converging along with drugs. There's a lot of this is needs to have massive sacred drug use as a much more normalized thing, which I think the third vein, where in the course of my documentaries and our books, people will find that all of the same players who are pushing all of the UFO PSYOP, UFO disclosure movement, including Lawrence Rockefeller himself, one of the most important members of the Rockefeller dynasty, who back in 1938 was also overseeing the War of the Worlds broadcast as the sort of the first predictive programming experiment on human guinea pigs to see how humans would react if we were given messaging from radio trusted news broadcasts that aliens were invading and killing humans. What would we do? It was a guinea pig laboratory experiment masquerading as entertainment. That same Lawrence Rockefeller was also the major bankroller of Terence McKenna and the Green Earth Project of the psilocybin culture that Terence McKenna, as a psilocybin, psychedelic guru, had a big role in being sent around the world, developing encyclopedias that had a scientific veneer of different type of psychotrips you could get from different types of plants and fungus to basically revive the old mushroom cults that did exist as part of the pagan age. That was part of the thing. So the MK Ultra, also a lot of the key players around Alan Dulles, who's also overseeing the UFO cult, is also bankrolling the CIA MK Ultra program that's generating LSD, that's generating DMT, that's generating the psilocybin technologies that are then disseminated into campuses across America in the 1960s. Not a coincidence, and being popularized by military-industrial families, or children of military-industrial high-end families like Jim Morrison, whose father was responsible for the Gulf of Tonkin, false flag. That guy is like popularizing the drug culture, as are the parents of the mamas and the papas, who are very high up in the military-industrial complex, as is Frank Zappa's parents. They're all coming out of Laurel Canyon. They're all coming out of Palo Alto. And so you have this thing whereby Terence McKenna's thesis is that drugs are actually giving us access to the fifth or sixth or seventh dimension, which is where special people, and we're special because, and we're enlightened because we know how to do sacred drugs, can interface with these spirit beings that are actually the aliens, that are benevolent, or some, there's various twists of the narrative. Some people say that there's different species. Some are evil aliens that give us bad trips, and then you got good aliens that give us good trips. But either way, it's these aliens that have been, this is what they say Jesus was doing. He must have been doing drugs to give him access to aliens who gave him endowments with special powers to walk on water. And Muhammad gave him, must have been doing sacred drugs to be able to interface with the aliens who gave him the ability to hop on a donkey to fly into the sky and stuff. So it's part of the same kind of shamanic mind game, which is a big lever of control amongst many of these integrated intelligence agencies that Peter Thiel was empowered by and was assigned to carry out when he was working and receiving funding and directives for the CIA's In-Q-Tel back in 2004, when he created Palantir, right, on behalf of In-Q-Tel and people like Richard Pearl and John Poindexter from Iran-Contra fame, who tried to create the Total Information Awareness Agency that didn't work out in 2003. They basically channeled all of those functions to the thing called Palantir, utilizing the all-seeing eye of Lord of the Rings as their model. But the all-seeing eye also comes with the eye of Horus, right? That's looking upon everybody in this panopticon, where people would not want to do or even think bad thoughts if they felt like all of their biometrics were constantly being monitored but at all times. People won't say bad things. They won't do unacceptable things. They won't do unacceptable thoughts because they have predictive thought crime. And that's part of the Palantir mandate from the get-go, as was total information awareness of Poindexter, who went to jail for what he was doing with Ollie North, right? But this is the guy that oversaw and worked with Peter Thiel. It selected Peter Thiel from amongst the Stanford groomed PayPal mafia circuit. You know, this nest of people that, like Elon Musk, also came out of the same Stanford operation and became part of the early PayPal mafia too. And all of them were just vetted, groomed, assigned to be, I would say, and you and I did a whole show on this that was pretty popular, cardboard cutouts. Like Bill Gates was a cardboard cutout. His parents were major players in IBM. His mom was a major executive at IBM. His dad was a major player running the Planned Parenthood for David Rockefeller. You know, these guys are not geniuses who just come out of their garages as geniuses with this great technology that's super convenient for military intelligence. It already was Larry Ellison, right? This guy was a CIA contractor creating Project Oracle for the CIA before he came out with his Oracle AI, which has its major contractor as the CIA. Whitney Webb's done great work on that. So it's like, yeah, Jeff Bezos, his grandparents or his grandfather was a major top deep state player at the State Department and military industrial complex. It's not a coincidence, you know. So yeah, I think that their obsession with the Antichrist, I think also Peter Thiel's obsession has probably something to do, I would say, as well with Opus Dei. There's this researcher named Jules Evans who did a really good paper, an essay. Half of it is free, half of it is behind a paywall. I suggest people read this essay, although Jules Evans, he actually wants a massive psychedelic legalization program as the basis of a new religion. That's part of what he wants, but he does good work otherwise. And he did this paper called "Can Opus Dei Become Less Culty?" It's a great paper, and it does map out young Peter Thiel's recruitment to Opus Dei, his grooming by this thing in the early 80s or the mid 80s when he was at Stanford. His I did work that proved also that it was at this very same time that various neocons around Richard Pearl began. Irving Kristol became the primary financial backer of him in 1987 or 88 when he created the Libertarian Stanford Review that he ran for 4 years. And these guys became his groomers and became his handlers after George Bush's 9/11 operation in 2001. So I think part of that is that you've got this religiosity, this obsession with the Book of Revelation, this obsession with end times contained within the inner core of the neoconservative Straussian, networks of the Opus Dei networks as well, that are sort of a spin-off of the Jesuits. When the Jesuits became more left-oriented, there was a vacuum because formerly they had occupied a more right institutional role in the previous centuries. All of a sudden, under the modernists of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, they took on more of a left orientation, a Marxist integration orientation, and so that former space they filled had to be filled with something new, out of which I think Escriva was assigned in Spain to create the Opus Dei as sort of a mirror image, a dark mirror to the Jesuits, which they did, and they've continued to fulfill as a function, even being propped up in a weird way in certain movies like Dan Brown's Thing. Not propped up, but even just featured as the cartoonish supervillains whipping themselves, which they do for the true believers. So yeah, I think you've got this idea. And again, when you look at a lot of the Satanists and those who carried out the growth of Nazism and what they had in mind, they were all obsessed with end times and the Book of Revelation. They're all obsessed with fulfilling on earth God's will. And in their mind, the Book of Revelation proves that God demands that the earth boil and burn in a cataclysm out of necessity. It's like preordained. And that thus to do the will of their perverse, sick idea of the Creator is to be instruments to advance that eschatological kind of cataclysm, out of which chaos some form of new promised age, a golden age, can emerge. I mean, that's part of their formula for social control and management too, is that.
And I think that may be one of the reasons why all of the tech giants like Bill Gates, they come from a eugenics background, and that is hidden away in the background where a lot of people don't understand. But before we close, I want to play this clip, and this is about AI, Peter Thiel, and Palantir, and I want your assessment after this. This comes from RT, so I want you to pay attention to this right here.
Silicon Valley's conquest for a techno-fascist future has hit a roadblock, as Berlin's apparently telling the U.S. tech giant Palantir that it's not buying experimental American AI military programs. The CEO, Alex Karp, is up in arms about it.
What products will Europe buy to defend itself? Will they buy products that have been tested in PowerPoint presentations, or will they buy the products that can single-handedly stop a major military power?
Karp went as far as to compare debate about his company within Germany to discussing witchcraft. God forbid anybody criticize tech fanaticism, especially from a company that profits from AI killing programs. Those who drank the Karp Kool-Aid, though, like Kiev, have gained the techno-Führer's approval.
You can think of it as an operating system for war. Just as companies use operating systems, Ukraine has one for the modern battlefield.
Kiev's state partnership with Palantir seems to be just one theater in a global crusade outlined in a book, The Technological Republic. Many have criticized it as an outright fascist manifesto for the West's role in the 21st century, as it calls for a return to exerting power through superior weaponry, this time relying on AI. Reinstating the draft in the United States and remilitarizing Germany and Japan are also on the agenda. Essentially a jingoistic jolt to the entire Western world. And Karp hasn't wasted time trying to make his imperialist dreams a reality either. Alongside his book launch, he brokered another project with Kiev called Brave One Data Room, intended on developing AI based on data collected throughout the Ukraine conflict. It's one of many live experiments that Palantir is conducting in Ukraine.
Partners want our data. We will build a system where they can train their software products using our data. Today, data from the front is extremely valuable. That's why we'll build a data field to train their AI models.
Training ground? More like a petri dish for AI military technologies. Palantir itself makes no secret of that fact, especially not the head of its UK operations, Lewis Mausley, who, by the way, is the grandson of the founder of the British Union of Fascists. But wait, it gets crazier. When Karp interviewed Mausley for the job, Lewis's would-be boss reportedly started reciting his grandfather's 1939 speeches from memory, in which he called for peace with the Nazis. And now his grandson is collaborating with a neo-Nazi regime to use Ukraine as his personal laboratory.
Ukraine has been the R&D lab for AI in a military context for the last 3 years. It is the absolute bleeding edge of military technology. There is no substitute for a real battlefield.
Of course, anomalies and mistakes in the lab are of very little importance to the techno-fascists. After all, the civilian deaths are nothing more than perishing lab rats when the real world becomes a petri dish. Take the Minab Elementary School bombing at the beginning of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. 175 people were killed, mostly children, by an experimental AI targeting system, which many reports suggest was created by none other than Palantir. Then there's Israel's Lavender AI targeting system. It's officially clocked 37,000 targets in a conflict that has taken the lives of nearly 80,000 Palestinian civilians. There's no way of knowing the system's margin for error either. We just have to take Karp's word for the claim that it's mostly effective.
Your AI and your technology from Palantir kills Palestinians!
Mostly terrorists, that's true.
No, it's not. And you say mostly, so it's okay to kill
Okay.
innocent others.
Look, if your argument was so strong, wouldn't you let me talk?
The thing is, though, computers do make mistakes, and they make more than a few of them.
One of the problems with AI is that it can sometimes hallucinate, and that these hallucinations can get embedded into the reports, then they can go up. And so, you know, one of the problems with these LLMs is that you got to check it. And you have to have adversarial testing on the data to make sure that the data that's coming in is actually really good. It isn't always accurate. I know that there has been some casualties within the Iranian and Israeli war where some imprecise munitions were used against a girl's school. And, the argument is being made is that they need to have better AI for better targeting. That goes to the importance of updating information. Artificial intelligence is only as good as the information that's being fed in. And if the information that's being fed in is garbage, then so are the decisions. And so it appears that's what we've got here with this Iranian school.
Terminator-style weaponry and techno-fascist billionaires in bed with state actors. It's a dangerous equation seeming to bring about a new age of AI oligarchy in a Western world finding it more and more difficult to understand what democracy it actually has left.
Yeah.
Floor is yours. The floor is yours on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I was impressed that they zeroed in on Oswald Mosley's grandson, Louis Mosley, as the CEO of Palantir UK, and most people do miss that. And I didn't know. I learned something new. I didn't know that he got the job with Alex Karp by reciting from memory his grandfather's incendiary 1939 speeches. That's very interesting to me, and it's I guess not so surprising in some ways. The more you know, but it is exactly what the Nazi high command. Which look, Oswald Mosley. For those who don't know, this guy was the head. He was the Führer of England. He was a member of Parliament. He was a member of the high aristocracy. He was a member of the Fabian Society as well as the Theosophists, as well. And he was the guy who was goose-stepping. He had the Oswald Mosley black shirts, and he would have been the Prime Minister of England had Hitler's efforts, of which there were many, to create a peace deal with England and with the pro-fascist American Wall Street bankers as well. Hitler was always trying to get a peace deal. And oftentimes, Franklin Roosevelt is criticized for not supporting those who wanted to appease and create a peace deal with Nazi Germany. It's like, no, he just knew that Hitler was not going to just be a nationalist who was going to just be happy with Germany. He openly talked about the need to create a Lebensraum, to create a global order founded upon a hierarchical division of human castes around the Übermenschen, overhuman master overlords, and the Untermenschen majority, of which the Slavs were a lower caste. The blacks were even lower, to all be relegated to their particular regions and then controlled by a master class of engineers from above. And Oswald Mosley was the man in England to do that. And his right-hand man, who was his lieutenant and the guy who was going to become the Secretary of Defense of England, was JFC Fuller. JFC Fuller was the Grand Master of Aleister Crowley's Argentum Astrum Lodge of 1907. He was a high-level black magician working with Gerald Gardner and other Wiccans doing black magic during World War II. As part of the thing that, Ian Fleming and his brother Peter Fleming were both high-level MI6 operatives with this occult department in MI6 that was working with the Crowleyites, which included J.C.R. Fuller, who invented Blitzkrieg. His work on tank warfare is still taught at West Point today. His work on military history, he was known as a military historian. Winston Churchill celebrated him and promoted this guy as a great military historian in 1945. His thesis of the causes of World War II are still published and treated as if they're like standard gospel. This is Aleister Crowley's disciple who ran one of the most powerful Star of the East Argentum Astrum lodges, more powerful than even Crowley's OTO lodge. Right? This is Oswald Mosley's right-hand man. And the fact that of all people in the world, you have Oswald Mosley's grandson selected to manage Palantir UK, which got the biggest deal of integration with the United States last year between two supposed enemies, Keir Starmer, the left woke, effeminate, Fabian socialist, and right-wing conservative nationalist Trump, who seem to be, we're sold on this image that they're like representing, they hate each other, but No, they signed a deal that gave Palantir total integration with the UK. And the British fascists are coming back. You see Elon Musk giving all sorts of incendiary speeches to Tommy Robinson, who's working hard to nudge and radicalize the conservatives to becoming essentially what the Germans became in the 1930s in opposition to the Bolshevik left. The immigration problems that were caused by the shit economy and the unjust economy, that type of scarcity and resentment to others coming in from other countries that the Germans were feeling in the 1920s. That's exactly the feeling that is being cultivated yet again to radicalize the conservatives under Tommy Robinson, who Elon Musk is always propping up. He's, his Grok AI, which also has deals with the military, just like Palantir AI has deals with the military, integrating, overcoming the moral boundaries that formerly were in place, are being overcome as they're both applying it to foreign countries in Ukraine and in the Middle East and other places. I mean, it's being embedded within the operating systems of the police departments of Canada, of the health distribution agencies of Canada too. That a lot of this came in during COVID, didn't go away. Once they come in, that's the thing, right? They build up a whole architecture that's super complex, highly specialized, and that makes the whole agency of whatever it is, food distribution, food management, like Palantir has just gotten control of the food management systems of the United States. Once they introduce their operating system, their highly specialized software, you can't just kick them out. It's through the medium that they gain their control. You could nominally cancel their contract, but you're now stuck with their systems unless you completely break everything down and rebuild from scratch, which most people don't want to do, and they don't have the ability to do it. So that's part of the way that this is kind of like a reverse virus. They did this into China too. They don't. It's not Palantir in China, but China has been battling this foreign agency from Stanford, from Silicon Valley, which since the 90s has been trying to insert itself to build up this nasty, predatory fintech exploitative system that wants to bring in social credit. Now, China didn't do it. They fought back. They have a nationalist movement that's much more vibrant than ours, much more morally advanced than ours. And they have fought back against this thing. They've put millions of traitors who are high-level operatives in jail. Some have gotten executed for playing a role, advancing the CIA MI6 agenda. But it's a battle that's still underway. Russia is fighting it in their own way, but they're doing not as good of a job as China. I would say they're behind in that battle, largely because China didn't allow as much into their society as the Russians did in the 1990s. When China was able to kick out George Soros in 1989, the Russians ended up just keeling over and allowing in all of these foreign powers, that were all Darwinian psychopaths on the pay and the direction of the city of London and Wall Street. They let that in, so they had a lot more work to do and still do to try to undo that damage. China's in a better place, but there aren't very many countries that are in such a good place. A lot of countries have been handicapped in varying degrees, and we've been given a public drama like a World Wrestling Federation type of narrative to give us, to satisfy our desire to see a battle between Manichaean forces of light and left wokist forces of darkness. And a lot of it is just it's smokescreen, betraying this other thing.
In closing, Matt, is it anything that you want to say to the people before we go off the air?
Well, I'd say, once you see it, don't unsee it. Focus on building on your knowledge and then act accordingly. There have been things that have been done throughout history to stop these Thousand-Year Reichs, these New World Orders from happening. If we actually study what Roosevelt did, if we study what JFK was doing, what policies they were invoking, and what understanding they had of the terrain that they were operating within, there's a lot of resource. Or look at what China's even been doing today to battle this other insurgency, the fifth columnists within China, that many ignorant Westerners are in an oversimplistic mindset, labeling all as one thing. And we're not seeing the actual battle that's happening right in front of our face, which would otherwise give us a sense of solution of what we could do, what we could work with for a viable battle against this very ancient beast. So yeah, I'd say with that in mind, the documentary series that we're publishing. We've made it all available for free to watch. The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs, the books that Cynthia and I have been publishing on the Revenge of the Mystery Cults, the Clash of the Two Americas, her work on the Empire in Which the Black Sun Never Set is a fantastic tool, a weapon in the warfare to understand like what is it that the Empire is afraid of. So yeah, people just need to look in these sorts of directions, and yeah, I can't say much more than that.
I'm going to add all of that in the description. I have to add it later because you know what was going on before the show. So, Matt, I'm going to add everything after the show, and then I'll send you the link, man. Thank you so much. Tell your wife I say be blessed and be safe, man. And I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
I will talk to you later.
Bye.
All right. Everybody listen. As I say to you all, listen, please remember, do right by others, not because there's some material gain to be had or because some accolades to be had, but do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, remember that God Almighty is watching you. And as my late, great, and beautiful and wonderful mother would always say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low at the actions of man. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous. Hey, hit the like button and share also. Hey, mama, your baby boy still loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Peace. We're out of here.